You're listening to Unlocking Our Sound Heritage and Folklore and Superstitions, brought to you by Manx National Heritage, the charity responsible for the Isle of Man's natural and cultural heritage. The sound recordings you'll hear today and throughout this series on Manx Radio are part of a unique collection of around 600 sound recordings digitised from the Manx National Heritage Sound Archive and available now online for the first time. The team at Manx National Heritage hope you enjoy eavesdropping on the voice clips we've chosen from the nation's sound archive, all of which can be listened to in full at imuseum.im.
The Isle of Man's culture is rich with folklore and what some people might call superstition. Let's listen to the Garretts of Grenaby, interviewed by Manx Radio in the 20th century, as they talk about a number of superstitions, including how unlucky it is to cut down a tramon tree.
Well, George Quayle in his book had a theory about this, didn't he? That there was something growing on the grain, on the wheat at the time. There was a sort of gave them hallucinations.
Aye, that's right. The smote.
Aye.
Smote. We call it smote. And that. Well,
have you ever had hallucinations?
No. Only when I've had ale.
Any other superstitions? Well, you're not superstitious at all?
No. Well, what? Why? There's no reason, you know. No. I was never. I didn't mind walking under a ladder, but I remember people. Well, my grandfather, especially up there, some of the uncles, they wouldn't start to do nothing on a Friday. Like sowing corn or sowing turnips. They'd start on Thursday night and just do a few ridges so they'd be ready for Friday. But they wouldn't start a new job on the Friday because one time it was Hangman's Day, so they wouldn't...
Hangman's Day?
It was Hangman's Day, it was a Friday, so they wouldn't do nothing on a Friday. You know, and not no new job, they do their jobs they were doing. Or,
yeah, wouldn't start anything fresh?
No, wouldn't start anything fresh on a Friday.
What about the Friday the 13th then? Was that even worse, was it?
Well, I don't know, that didn't seem to...
count.
What, they couldn't... What?
They couldn't count, you see.
Were there any other superstitions, Howard, do you remember?
Well, I remember when we lived in the village once, just after we were married, and my wife complained about flies getting on the nappies, dirty in the nappies, and she said they were coming off a tree. So I said, I'll make short work of that. I went in, got the saw and cut it up, and fell and cut it up for firewood. And the next day I went home, she said there was some old fellow looking over the hedge, and he said that my son girl have done a bad job there, cutting the tree down. You should never have done that. You should never cut a tramon tree down.
All right, yes.
Always pull it, or break it, or do something, but never... You'll have bad luck now, he said. And by God, he was right.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
Get a stick and knock hell out of it.
Yeah?
The tramon tree.
Oh.
Why? Aye.
Yeah, it's a strange thing about the tramon tree, isn't it, really?
Yes.
And here's George Quayle, interviewed in 1970, talking about the connection between tramon trees and fairies.
Now, we lived the best part of our life in Glen, and it's certainly a lovely glen. And out toward the upper end is a place known as the Billagorum. It really means the blue tree. It's a cavity in the glen. And of course the tramon trees too were always the favourite trees of the Faeries. And different people at earlier times have been disputing where the Billagorum was. But we can go back for a long time. I think it was a man called Brethren Lawton who wrote some poetry and all too, wrote a book on the island, and he mentions in one of his things where the fays of Glentramon were fearfully screaming and weaving their spells round the old Billagorum. Well, that's gone back, of course, to the 1830s. And it was here that the Billagorum was supposed to be where the origin of the Fynoderees. The Faeries were having the harvest festival at Glenrushen, and the fairy prince was missing. And when they went to look for him, they found him with a mortal girl up our glen toward the Billagorum, and they were so disgusted that he was turned into the hairy Fynoderees, doomed to swing by himself in the tramon trees. Well, he was isolated from the rest of the pack and all that kind of thing, but he was always a good fairy. He did things for people. He thrashed the corn and plucked the geese and gathered in the sheep and everything else. And he got probably blamed for quite lots of things, but he certainly was, even at the present time, looked upon by some of the people as a good fairy. And when things are done that people don't understand how they got done, they think that the hairy Fynoderees had a hand in the business.
Let's listen to Mr. and Mrs. Comish from Grenaby, interviewed in the 20th century, as they talk about a helpful Fynoderee and keeping the fairies happy.
Well, what was your story you were going to tell us?
About the Fynoderee coming round one very, very stormy night, and he called to the farmer, "You can lie to, I've got all your sheep in, they're all safe. But there was one little lochtan, I had to chase her 3 times round Barul before I got her. And in the morning, when the man went out, he had a hare in with the sheep. That was the little lochtan that he had to chase round the mountain."
That was in the snowstorm, was it?
But that was in a snowstorm, yes. But the Fynoderee was the good fairy. But I've heard my mother say that when I was a baby, my great-grandmother was alive then, they wouldn't all go out of the house without putting a pair of trousers or else the tongs across the cradle, that the fairies wouldn't come to take the child if there was a pair of steel tongs or a pair of men's trousers on the cradle. Because in those days they were supposed to take the
exchange.
The babies away and leave a changeling.
Yes.
So I've heard. I couldn't say that that's true at all. But that was the general practice, apparently.
They were believing in the changing of the children, weren't they?
Yes. And I understood that you mustn't, if they had been changed, you mustn't interfere.
This was the fairies.
Yes, you must leave what they'd left in the pram.
In the cradle it would be.
Well, yes, in the cradle. Well, they'd come back again. They wouldn't leave their own too long if it wasn't taken out of the whatever it was in. And they said that it was cried in the night that the fairy would come and rectify it again and change over again.
And that was how they got it back?
Yes.
And did many people believe in this actually in your time?
Not in our time.
No, not so much, I don't think.
But our great-grandparents did.
Mrs. Comish now tells us about her grandmother's belief in fairies and the Moddhey Dhoo.
But my grandmother did believe in fairies a bit, and the Moddhey Dhoo. The Moddhey Dhoo was travelling up the Down with chains on them. And at one time, there was 2 girls from Ballarobin and 2 girls from Ballagilbert. They had been visiting each other, and they stood on opposite sides. And I think it was the Ballagilbert girls that heard something and ran. And the Ballagilbert girls didn't hear anything at all. That was when my grandmother was young. But my grandfather never believed in fairies at all. Although he was old and had lived through all that, he always thought whatever sounds there was, there must be a cause. And he's talked about going down to the mill at Grenaby to thrash. They cut the corn down, and perhaps the miller wouldn't have time to thrash. They were going down at night to do the thrashing. And one night when he was going down past here, he heard chains clanking too. But it was Tommy Maddrells or Johnny Maddrells, I don't know, sow with a blanket on her. So he thought that if anybody else would have heard it, it would have been a fairy. And I've heard my grandmother on my father's side talk about working in a farm down here at Grenaby, and there was a horse sick. And the boss, Mr. Cool, said, well, you'll have to go to the 3 roads and sweep. Well, it would be, yes, 3 roads, the 3 roads in Grenaby. And she had to take a brush with her and a shovel. So she carried the dust home in a brat, and threw it on the horse, and the horse got better. They got the dust of whoever was harming the horse, they got the dust. But whether that's the way that cured the horse or not, I don't know.
Staying in Grenaby, we're back with the Garretts, who talk about some strange occurrences on a farm.
Well, what about superstitions then? Because there are a lot of them around the Isle of Man. Were there any on the farms?
Well, I think there's a few around Grenaby. The Faeries.
Oh,
I remember when I used to come home from school, there was an old fellow down here at the bottom sitting, and he says that he was caught by the Faeries. I was took, he said, by the Faeries one day when he was a young fella. And they were all dancing around me, he said, and I was there frightened her at, he said. And I said to him, how did you get on? Did they all... He said he peed on them, and they all ran.
And they all ran away?
And they all ran down on the trees. I sorry to that shift to them.
I think he was having you on, wasn't he?
I don't know. No, they were seeing things those days, weren't they?
Why were they then?
Johnny Bigfoot was down there, wasn't he?
I don't know.
Just a minute. Johnny Bigfoot, who's that?
I don't know who he was, they'll tell you.
Who was Johnny Bigfoot?
I don't know who he was. He was supposed to be walking up and down Grenaby Hill here of a night. Jackie Squarefoot he was.
Jackie Squarefoot?
Aye, Jackie Squarefoot. The old people reckons he had feet about 2 foot long. You know, and he used to be about here at night. But I never seen him.
There's a fella called Bigfoot in America. Maybe he's gone over there.
Well, maybe it's a son of his that went out to America, you know. But that's fly. He was about here. He used to legend round here, like when we were kids. All the old people would tell you about Jackie Squarefoot. Some of them had seen him, I think. But
Was this to frighten you, was it?
well, I don't know what, but they actually thought they'd seen him. I don't know.
We'll now be hearing from Tom Dodd, interviewed in 1950, who tells the tale of a weaver and the king of the fairies.
Can you tell us the tale of the weaver's beam? Oh, the weaver's beam, yes, I remember. I remember the late Caesar Cashin telling the story of the weaver's beam. The old pither, that's what the Manx people called the weaver, lived out on the road to Glenrushen, the road going off Glenmay, you know, out to Glenrushen. And he was very friendly with the king of the fairies in that district. In those days, if you don't happen to know it, there were many fairies in the Isle of Man, and they didn't all belong to the same coterie. There were various classes and of various tribes, and they were quite friendly, and they were in the habit of visiting one another. So one night the weaver was sitting by his fireside, and there was a knock at the door, and when he answered it, there was the king of the fairies seated on a big white horse, and behind him all the other fairies on horseback too. So the king said to the weaver, "Come on," he said, "we're going down to Kirkmichael to visit the fairies there tonight." And the weaver said, "I can't go," he said, I haven't got a horse," he said. "Oh, don't talk like that," says the weaver. Says the king of the fairies to him. "Fetch your weaver's beam out," he said. "And what for?" says the old weaver. "That's dreadful heavy." "Never mind the for," he said, "you fetch it out here." So the weaver brought the beam out. "Now cock your leg over that," says the king to him. And as soon as he did that, lo and behold, he was on as good a horse as any of them. And off they set then for Kirkmichael, down through Glenmay, past Patrick, into Peel, and along the shore road from Peel in the direction of Kirkmichael. And when they got to the Gleadon Kem, you know that place where it makes a big circle round, the weaver was astounded to see all the horses in front of him with their riders jump clean across the chasm instead of going round. and he wondered what on earth was going to happen to him. And when he got up to the chasm, bless me, if his horse didn't jump it as well as any of them. And the weaver was so astounded that he ejaculated, "Mayi Cren Liam San Bemel." My God, what a jump for a beam. And by using the sacred name, the spell was broken, and there he was at Llyn Kem, several miles away from Glenrushen, astride of a big balk of timber.
From fairies to witches, let's listen to David Collister, who, as a Manxman, doesn't believe in arguing with legend.
Well, we used to go up Slewallion and what they call today skateboards.
Yeah.
To us was just a plank with a rope on the front. And we'd drag it up the top of the hill and lie on it and slide down the hill.
Yeah.
And story had it that there were two ladies tried in the courthouse here. This, again, could marry up with the story of the building and being a courthouse. They were tried in the courthouse and found to be witches.
Mm.
So they were taken up to Slewallion, put into barrels and rolled down the hill. And when they hit the hedge at the bottom where we used to stop, they were taken out dead and buried there. And today there are 2 thorn bushes there where the burials were. Now whether this is just legend or story, I have no proof. But it was always told. As we were children, we were
So
always told.
you don't know whether to believe it or not?
I'm not arguing. No, I'm a Manxman. I don't argue with legend. I get on with it. Tray the lure.
And now a ghostly story about Strand Street from Mrs. McIntyre, interviewed in the 20th century.
Strand Street.
This is the story about the ghost.
Mm. I was coming over Strand Street and it was about 10 o'clock at night. A very beautiful, bright moonlight night. And I happened to look towards the door and I saw a woman standing there. Unusual, very unusual looking woman. I knew it wasn't natural. So
And did you actually see her face?
Oh yes. And her hair brushed back tight on, like the old people used to do. And a dark brown, tight-fitting bodice, fitted into the waist. And she was looking like that, as though she was stiff like that, looking up toward the chimneys opposite, the houses opposite. I felt my head going right up like that. So I went into a friend's house, and she was at the door waiting for me to come in, and because I'd been in just before, and she said, "Is anything the matter?" She saw by my face I was frightened. And I said, "I saw a woman standing over there in that doorway." And she ran out at once, and she couldn't have got out of sight either side of the street in the time. She didn't see anything. So I asked 2 or 3 people, old people whom I knew, if they'd ever heard about anything like that. And they'd all heard about it. And they wondered that I had seen it. And one day I was coming over, one afternoon I was coming over the street afterwards, and I met a person there, and she said, "Is it true you saw the woman in that back door?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "My mother saw it when she was a very little girl," she said. They were living opposite. And she was sent out on a message one night, she said, and when she got up the steps from her own house, she said she saw that, and she ran back screaming in the house, and she went from one fit into another. They thought she would never have lived, she said. Her mother didn't. She was so frightened. So then I was speaking to an old man who had been reared with his grandmother down on Queen Street, and he'd heard her speak about it. And he told me that there was a man had lived in that house, and his wife was bad to take drink. And he used to get his living by selling potatoes, going into Douglas with cart loads of potatoes in the winter time and herrings in the summer. And one day there was no herrings in early in the morning, and he wanted to do some other job, and he asked his wife to give us some money to go and get some corn for his horse. He hadn't time to go himself. And when he'd come back, he said he would go to the quay again. When he came back, the woman had been out to get the corn, but she didn't get any corn. She had got drink, and she was at the bottom of the stairs, the worse for drink. And he took something and killed her. And she was at the back door, and all she come. They said it was only on a Wednesday night, about 10 o'clock. She was seen, and it was Wednesday night at 10 o'clock. I saw her. Wasn't that strange?
It was. And that's when it happened.
That's when it happened. And when I came home here then, my sister was here, and all the rest of the family had gone to bed. And she was wondering where I was. And the person that I'd gone to see came up here with me. So she said, where in the world have you been when I came in here? And I said, I've had an awful fright. And she said, your face looks like it. What's the matter? So I told her the yarn. She said, and were you frightened? Frightened? I said, I didn't know what to do with myself. I was so frightened.
Mr. Kelly of Garwick recorded his memories in 1991. First, let's hear a tale of an unusual transformation.
Another instance I can give you of animal instinct. Well, my father and I were out hunting. I was only in Ypres, of course, up round by Horner's Quarry. Well, the dog, or rather a bitch it was, and my grandfather's a bitch named Kate, a good hunting dog, put a hair up suddenly. Well, my father took a snapshot at it, and fluff come off the hare's leg, but it carried on. And strange it may seem, the dog didn't go after it, she just sat down, which was well away from her usual instinct. Of course, my father and I ran round Croncagarra after it to see if we'd, catch up with it, or if we'd wounded it badly. We got round by Horner's Perk there, and we met a woman coming toward us. A certain woman, I don't mention names, of course, who had a reputation of having the evil eye, and her leg was all bleeding. My father asked her what had happened. She said she caught on some barbed wire. Well, I don't suppose there was barbed wire within a 1.5 mile radius of where we were, but the dog cowered behind us while we were talking to this woman. So what did that dog know? You tell me, I can't tell you. The one thing I can tell you for certain is that my father never lifted a gun to a hare in his life after that.
Next, Mr. Kelly talks about a woman who supposedly had the evil eye.
There was another certain woman. She lived on Baldrine Hill, who was supposed to have the evil eye. And I know she used to come down to Garwick Beach at low water to gather flitters and winkles. Well, flitters to English people are limpets off the rocks. Now my grandfather would never put the boat to sea, no matter the pots could rot in the sea or the nets could stop where they were. He would never put the boat to sea till the tide had flowed over where she'd been. Oh no, never. And I don't know, she may have carried the evil eye on to me, because even when I was almost grown up, in 16, 17 region, I had a little cotton 1923 model, quite a fast little job, nice little thing, very proud of it, But if I passed her on Baldrine Hill, of course it might have been coincidence, but before I'd gone less than a mile, I'd have something wrong. Mag timing gone, broken chain, a puncture. Of course it could, as I say, all have been coincidence. But I've seen me coming along by Garwick Stores there, and I've seen her on the hill, and I've turned the bike up the old Clovenstone Road to go home. I suppose superstition is inherent, but I used to think she'd carry the evil eye on to me after my grandfather was gone.
Finally, back with the Garretts of Grenaby, who prove that not everyone on the Isle of Man is superstitious after all.
We've been talking, among other things, about superstitions. And by tradition, rats are known as longtails by the seamen in the island, and have been, as long as I can remember, certainly. But not, it seems, the farmers. I asked George Garrett if, on the farms, they would really be terribly bothered about using rat instead of longtail.
No, the rat's as a rat. What else can you?
Longtail?
Oh, well, anything could be a long tail. Not only a rat has got a long tail,
What? You're not, are you?
Are you superstitious?
No, but everybody else seems to be.
Oh, well, that's all right then.
Have you ever called them longtails, then?
No.
Oh.
Call them by their proper name.
Aye.
That's all we ever called them, wasn't it? Rats.
Aye.
Nice. Yes.
But they were a big problem on the farms, weren't they?
They were once. But The fourpence a tail, or the tuppence a tail it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And fourpence for the she one.
Thanks for listening to Folklore and Superstitions. Join us in December for more episodes, or in the meantime, listen again on the podcast available on the Manx Radio website. You can visit imuseum.im and click on Unlocking Our Sound Heritage to listen to these and many, many more sound recordings from the Manx National Heritage Sound Archive. To find out more about the charity Manx National Heritage and how you can support us, visit our website manxnationalheritage.im or join us on Facebook.